Welcome everyone to another episode of Live Chat with Viv and Phil. Today we have two great individuals that will be discussing with us the importance of teachers and the lack of teachers that we have today, the shortage, I should say. And we are so excited about this conversation, right, Vilma?
Very.
Because the lack, I'm sorry?
I can add some information being in education myself.
Oh, sure, definitely. And last time we had nurses on, and we brought some awareness to the field and that there's a lack and there's a shortage of nurses. And now we want to able to bring in and hone in on a focus on teachers, because there's such a great need for this field in this arena. We have two great individuals that would introduce themselves and let you know a little bit about them. So if you don't have anything else to say, Vilma, we're just going to have these beautiful, handsome gentlemen introduce themselves.
That sounds better.
Yes.
Yes. I think, do you think that they planned this to be both bald coming on?
Well,
is that a pact or something? Or is it age?
I was born this way.
Oh.
I was considering growing my hair back over the last couple of hours, but it didn't work out for me.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll start with you, Mr. Peterson, to introduce yourself.
I'm Rob Peterson. I am a teacher at Glasgow High School, as well as an athletic director at Glasgow High School. Have been in the industry for going on 13 years now, in several different roles, from high school to elementary school, in Delaware in the public school system.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. We appreciate that information. That's amazing to know who you are this evening. I am Butch Ingram. I am the proud principal of Glasgow High School. Super excited to be here with you two once again on this very, very, very important topic. Just a little bit about me. I am now currently, like I said, the principal of Glasgow High School. This is year 23 in education for me.
Wow.
I have pretty much the K-12 experience. I've worked in the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, and the alternative school. So I've had exposure to all of those different populations of students and staff, and just really excited to be able to talk about, again, this important topic that we're all facing right now, right? And that's in education and just having a shortage of educators available to be able to kind of support our students. So anything we can do to bring awareness to that and be available to have conversations about that, I'm always willing, and Mr. Peterson as well, because we work collaboratively together, just willing to really just bring some awareness and talk about some things possibly to be able to kind of help support it where it's possible. So thank you for having me.
You are welcome.
okay, Vilma, jump right in. Let's go with your first question, especially they're eager to go. Let's get it started.
Okay, so you don't look as if you have a shortage of faculty or teachers, do you? You look so happy and like, man.
So we can both speak to that from different levels, right? Because some of the things that impact me don't necessarily impact him, and some of the things that are impacting him because of it, he can kind of speak to that don't necessarily impact me on that end. From my level, I guess, as just a principal and overseeing a building with that shortage, yes, we do. We do have a number of shortages presently in the building, primarily in our math and science areas. I think that's where we're seeing the greatest number of, or greatest lack in number of teachers available to support those students. So we're struggling there, struggling in a sense that we don't have certified individuals to support our students. We have been fortunate enough for some adults to step up and be a part of that and engage and want to be available to support us. But in terms of certified teachers to support that, we've kind of fallen a little bit short, but we've managed some ways to be able to support that. So that way students are still in front of a certified teacher, but we have additional support to be able to manage the classroom, if you would, to be able to manage that deficit. And I'll speak a little bit more, I guess, later about what we're doing to do that. But I guess Mr. Peter can speak about his huge class sizes now with that shortage. He can speak to it from that lens.
Yeah, I mean, it's impactful everywhere. You know, it's kind of like a ripple effect. and for those of us that love what we do, we step in and do what we can to make sure our kids are supported and taken care of, from a coverage perspective and, and trying to find that time to plan and even eat lunch, so to speak. And it's not that, Mr. Ingram, of course, as the principal of Glasgow High School, it's not that he's being selfish and taking duties away from us. That's definitely not the case. But from my perspective, as a staff member, I see what he's dealing with and understand what he's dealing with from my perspective. But we all, we kind of chip in and do whatever we can to support, and it's far reaching, as Mr. Ingram said, yes, it does impact in the classroom, but there's so many other roles in the building where that missing piece or missing component is showing itself. And ultimately the kids are the ones that struggle the most. And for us, we try to do what we can to make sure we're supporting, and I use that word wholeheartedly, supporting in every single aspect that we can to make sure our kids are not missing a beat. But as mentioned, from a coverage perspective, even kind of just monitoring the halls and monitoring certain classrooms, we all do what we can to make sure we're taking care of this entire scenario as much best we possibly can.
Mhm. So would you say about a 10% shortage of your normal 10, 5?
Yeah, I would say somewhere about that. I mean, maybe not necessarily that high, because right now, if we're talking in numbers of staff, staff in terms of teaching staff, I would say we're short probably 3 positions right now, which is better than a lot of places. I mean, I know there's some schools that right now are seeing numbers in excess of 20, right, at some of the high schools here in the state of Delaware, where they're needing that additional support. And then, of course, depending upon the size of the building, that's where it really matters, right? So if you have a staff of 200, 20 may not seem like a lot, but if you have a staff of 50, 5 is a lot, right? So you have to put it into perspective as to what that impact really is. And if I could just touch on something that Mr. Peterson just spoke about, that element outside of the classroom that's missing is when you miss those adults, you miss those role models, you miss those relationships, you miss those connections that are so very, very, very important for all of our students at this age level and even at a younger age level, where they have those bodies that are able there to support them. We have been fortunate at Glasgow to have a number of para-educators. They're not certified teachers, but they're working on degrees, and they have associate's degrees and a number of different skills and qualities that have stepped up, right? They really have just stepped up and decided that I want to help. I want to be able to make sure that the classrooms are secure. I want to learn myself, and I want to also be in position to be able to educate our students. So from that perspective, I think that we've been a little bit better off than many, because sometimes you don't have those extra people who are willing to just step up and manage the classroom and kind of take over. So I'm thankful for all of them stepping up and taking that challenge head on.
So in to follow up on that, what has created this shortage? What do you think?
That's
Why
interesting.
teachers?
I'll tell you what, just hearing some of the conversations, I'm sure Mr. Ingram has a whole different perspective probably. But I think it's interesting just hearing speaking from a ball guy, and I can only use the term barbershop conversation, right? And I hear people talk about, for example, I heard one example of a teacher leaving the profession, getting paid a certain salary as an actual educator, and decided to go into Walmart to become a manager because he was making more money, less the headaches from a school perspective.
Mhm.
And just from an educator's perspective, as Mr. Ingram talked about, and we mentioned before, there are so many roles in the building that we're missing. And yes, the academic piece is extremely important, but education is a holistic terminology, right? So there's the social aspects, there's that mentorship aspect, and yes, we have the classroom aspect, but there's so many missing pieces to the puzzle, and folks are just choosing to walk into other professions. And I get it, there's a mental health aspect that we deal with as educators as well. But I'm just, I think it's very interesting that these folks are choosing different fields and leaving this field, whether it be for the money or just for the mental health aspects of it. So I think it's a lot of different scenarios to look at as to why this is taking place.
Yeah, I think COVID, kind of accelerated some of our early retirements or some of our early retirees. It also has forced people to look at their lives very differently, right? And make different choices that they wouldn't have made prior to COVID actually taking over the world. So what we're finding is that people have more virtual options, or some more stay-at-home options, some more, to Mr. Peterson's point, some more mentally healthier mental options is the word I was looking for. And they've chosen to do that. But I think over the years, to your point, there has been a decline in the number of people going into education. I think I can't give you the exact statistic, but I was talking to some of the union presidents and some other principals and also some people in some other states, and you've seen thousands and thousands of certificates decrease over the years. I believe New Jersey alone, they were issuing at one point in 2011, I think there were somewhere around the neighborhood of 10,000 certificates, right, for teachers or educators, and it's now down to 2,500 or 3,000. Again, don't quote me on specific numbers, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective that over the years, they've lost that number of people going into education itself. And it's a lot involved in becoming an educator and teacher. You're no longer just that person standing up teaching a student how to read or teaching them a math concept or teaching them how to perform an experiment or teaching them some history. You have to be more of a mentor, more of a role model, more of a relationship builder, more of that mental health counselor, because of just the things that they're dealing with. Not that parents aren't doing their best at home to support their students, but there are just so many things that are going on right now these days that it's just overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming for everybody. And they themselves need that additional help and support. So when their students come to school, they're already dealing with things at home and they're bringing it in. You're the teacher and you're the educator and you want to give them everything that you have, but you have your own issues that you're dealing with at home too. So, you compound their issues with yours plus the child's, it just becomes a lot. And to Mr. Peterson's point, at times when you're thinking about your life, your sanity, and what you really want to do for yourself and your family, finance obviously is very, 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 very important because you have to live, you have to pay your bills. But more importantly, what can I do to be okay? So when I go home and I'm working with my family, that they're okay. And, it's a lot. It really is a lot. And I think that the demands from states and from the nation for us to perform at a much higher level and perform and be able to compete with other countries, there's a demand, right, for overall performance that is requiring more of us to be able to put our students in position to be able to do that. And sometimes I think when we do that, we kind of miss that holistic development that Mr. Peterson spoke to, where you're really developing a overall better person and you're pushing education, which is important, but you have to be careful and make sure there's a balance and you're supporting the overall mental health of a child. So there's a lot to unpack with all of that.
It does sound like a lot. It does sound a lot of things you gotta think about, all these segment of things, and not just teaching the child, but the overall picture of the child's welfare and mental state. So what are you guys doing in regards to, like you said, certain schools you're doing much better than other schools. So what things are you putting in place to, making sure that you're better than the other schools, having a 3% versus a school that's dealing with a 5% loss of teachers?
So you can't, if I could jump in, Mr. Peterson, you may have a different perspective.
Oh, no.
So you can't really control the numbers, right? The numbers are what they are. People have choice now. So teachers have the power, right? You can choose where you want to go at this point because there are a limited number of teachers and positions available. But what our district did with our superintendent and our chief academic officer, I want to make sure I get her title correct. What they've done is that they have aligned our high schools in particular together, right? So all three of our high schools are on the same schedule. So for example, if my second block if I don't have a math teacher, so I'm missing math in 4 of my 5 blocks. If I have the identical schedule to one of my other teachers, what COVID has taught us or has brought for us is the ability to utilize technology and Zoom. So what you can do now is a teacher could be teaching at Newark High School, and Christiana and Glasgow may not have a teacher necessarily, but they can now log in and get that education from a certified teacher via technology. It's not ideal. Obviously, you would like to have that person in front, physically in front of the student, but you're still getting the education. You're still able to get what is necessary for you to be to earn that credit and to move on to that next grade. So it's become easier now if you can become easier with COVID, but I think that we're better positioned and aligned for us to be able to kind of support our students. So that's one of the ways that we've been able to do that. And then, Mr. Peterson can probably speak to some of the additional responsibilities that some have to be able to kind of just pick up those missing pieces.
Great.
Oh, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting. Especially when I first heard about that particular scenario with you know, COVID is you know, we always, COVID is going to be here forever, right? With us, even in our conversation, it's kind of been like this paradigm shift, if you will, because it has taught us a lot of good has come out of it, regardless of the illnesses and that aspect. That was the major piece. But I mean, just from the experience, was a lot of positive, and that has been what Mr. Ingram talked about. You know, students and teachers, giving teachers a voice. I'll use that particular piece. Because teachers do have options, right? Their voice is now heard louder than ever before, from a financial perspective, from a duty perspective, from a work perspective. However, it's also created opportunities, as Mr. Ingram mentioned. Districts have made the adjustment to give students the opportunity to get the learning experience, even though they're not in the classroom. And that's never going away because we've proved that it can be done. So it's being done. But it has impacted everything else around us. Hence, of course, why we call it a paradigm shift. It has impacted how we do everything from playing sports. You know, me as an athletic director, you know, our students' participation numbers initially dwindled, and they're now climbing back up because students have an opportunity to be virtually connected to our buildings, but yet not be in the building, but still can participate as a normal student would. In addition to that piece, you know, even, you know, throughout the summer and just delivering, you know, reading materials to students. So from a relationship perspective, it's given us an opportunity to build different relationships with students that we didn't have in the past, right? So as I tell my students in my classes, it's one thing for an educator to know everything about a student, you know, where you live, your telephone numbers, because it's in our system. Now we can invite you into our world because this is real for us. You know, this has been an adjustment for all of us. So it's interesting because, you know, we have to be, you know, my mother will always tell me that, you know, you have to be like a rubber band and you live as you live this life because there's several adjustments. You got to be able to stretch, but just don't break. And this is put us in an opportunity as a teacher where you can stretch, and we've had to reach our limits and learning new and different materials from a virtual perspective. You know, we never thought we'd be teaching in class on Zoom. We're using Zoom as much as we do now, but it's a part of our life, right? Part of our lives. And as Mr. Ingram mentioned, you know, students are taking advantage of the opportunity. I spoke with a teacher, one of my fellow athletic directors, on yesterday, and he's a teacher in one of those virtual classrooms where there's students that's logging in from all over the state and tapping into his classroom as an athletic director, teaching the class. So I think, am I going to say that districts are doing everything that can be done? I think some are doing the best they possibly can to meet the need, because again, it's about the student. That's what it's about. It's not about us teachers. Yes, we're here. There's a shortage, absolutely. But ultimately, if we don't do right by students, it impacts us in the next several years.
So
Yes.
Vilma,
So true.
that was really good what you said, and I agree with you, Rob. But Vilma, I also want you to touch in light of colleges. What's the situation with colleges? Do you have the same shortage as the high school?
Yes,
in
yes,
your college setting?
yes. And sometimes the shortage, I think, is kind of artificial in the sense that they are there, but as was mentioned, there are competing jobs. COVID, for example, have made people think twice about their life, what they do. And I think that is a part of it as well, where people are, you know, recognizing, and I'm in the nursing field, in the medical field, as an educator, and nurses are burnt out. All the heroic things they did for during the COVID in the hospitals, they get burnt out. And I'm afraid that your faculty, Mr. Ingram, as well as others, in trying to accommodate for these shortages, are going to eventually burn out. So instead of getting better, there's going to come a time, and you mentioned about stretching and not breaking, that you're going to break because you need to be have your needs taken care of, your mental health taken care of. So it is not just in the elementary, middle, high schools, but also in universities and colleges. For example, something that I mentioned on our last podcast was you have nurses who are doing traveling because that level of commitment is not there when they are stationary with one employer. So they go from employer to employer, and it's like a 3 months. So it's a short contract, so they can always stop when they want to. They're not obligated to be there. So, and that's what we see, that it's earlier retirement, as you mentioned. It's just like, okay, I'm out of here. Jobs that they can use their skills that pay much more, and they're just tired. They're tired. And one of the things I want to ask you, we had shootings that take place in schools. Do you think this also have added to the shortages where teachers are not prepared to be there?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know in this region if that plays into it, because, and I'm not saying that it can't happen anywhere, but we have been fortunate that it hasn't happened as much on our side of the world, or our side of the country rather, than it has in other places. I mean, I think that it people think about it.
I'm knocking on
Right,
wood.
absolutely, absolutely. People think about it, obviously, just like it plays into, sometimes the level of disrespect that may come from a student. I mean, all of these things people are thinking about when they make a conscious decision to show up to work every day. And we obviously hope and pray for the best, but you never really know. And to everybody's point on the screen here, we talk about just the mental health aspects and the mental health the lack of positive things that are happening around us that are causing us to really, really think about what it is that we want to do with ourselves. And we don't take the mental time for ourselves, myself included. I'm fully transparency. I probably don't take as much mental health days as I should, just to make sure. Mr. Peterson the same way, because as he stated, he's an educator, he's an athletic director, he has a million things going on, just like all of us do here. And there's no such thing as balance, right? We talk about this all the time, and I'm a strong believer that there is no such thing as balance. Something has to get more than something else. Something is going to be less somewhere. Something's going to be missing at some point. You can try your best to balance, but there's no such thing, right? And in order for us to be okay, there has to be a stronger positive balance on one end versus the other. But something's got to give somewhere, and you just have to determine what that is. And with the economy the way that it is right now, at the present state, with the jobs the way that they are right now, with the sickness and the illness, and us coming out of COVID, but kind of back into it because it's now winter, we're about to be enclosed again and not really knowing what that's going to do to us. There are a lot of things that we really, really, really have to consider, not just in education, but really everywhere and everything. Because there's a decrease in a lot of jobs everywhere. So it's not just education, right? It is all over. To your point, nursing and every profession, police officers, I don't want to put that out there so people are listening, but there is a shortage of police officers nationwide. I mean, it just is. So it all plays into not necessarily job satisfaction, but just overall health and personal well-being, as much as it is job satisfaction, because everybody loves their job for the most part, or is going into or doing things that they really truly want to do. It's just, how much can I take before enough is enough, to your point, Ms. Davis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you a question and be very honest with me. Do you find parents being more demanding from you, or are they empathetic and recognize that you're doing the best that you can? Or are they still wanting, the hills and the valleys and everything thrown together?
I'll let Mr. Peterson answer that from a classroom and an athletic perspective, and then I'll speak on another.
I think parents were very empathetic during the pandemic. I think a lot of parents were empathetic during the pandemic because we have this thing called social media, and they were able to, see all the funnies, I don't know how you deal with my kid all day long. I'm here for a couple of weeks doing homeschool, and it's not working out. He's driving me crazy to go back to school. So parents were initially empathetic because from human nature, it's just kind of how it is. From a human nature perspective, you're empathetic of what's happening in our world, and that's how a lot of parents were. However, when students went back to school, they parents kind of, not all, but a lot of parents eased back into who they were, and to my personal belief, because my experience, have become even more demanding. To be quite honest, they're more demanding. Their kid is still the fastest, the strongest, and although they'll tell you they may not be, they'll say under their breath, he may not be she may not be the brightest kid or strongest kid or smartest kid, but yet they have a different conversation with you about the demands of you as an actual teacher. So, but again, just human nature. So they are more demanding overall. And from our perspective, from a teaching perspective, it hasn't really changed what I do and how I do. But I'm also empathetic of that parent, because that parent is frustrating, because as Mr. Ingram mentioned, as you mentioned also, Ms. Davis, this thing, we can look at this from a lens of just teachers or educators, but this has impacted our entire world, right?
Mhm.
Most families are struggling, right? Most families. So right now, let's look at where we are at this particular perspective. That during the pandemic, families received a lot of money, right? And they had nowhere really to spend it, right? They were all locked in. They got these checks from the government and they received these funds. They really they spent money on Amazon, right? Now, full circle, those funds have dried up, right? And those funds don't exist anymore. So now we're seeing frustrations everywhere from a financial perspective. We have people looking for jobs they may not be qualified for because they left their original job or lost their original job. So this is impacting everything and changing how we do everything. So I get the frustration from parents because we're feeling it, because we become the only ear that they can try to kind of lean on as teachers, right? And their child becomes their future. And I think from an honest perspective, they're probably fear for their child's future, so they're going to put all the demands on us to teach them something they probably should have learned a long time ago. So it has not changed. In fact, I feel like it's gotten a tad bit worse.
So just to add on to that, because I think he shared pretty much what I would be willing to share. I think that everybody to some degree is more frustrated than they were before. Unless you are super excited, which I am 90% of the time, about life and just everything that's going on, you're looking for someone or something to blame, not intentionally, but just because you're not happy or excited about the current state of where you sit, for whatever that reason may be. So we tend to be the sounding board for a lot of those things because of their children, and they want the best for their children. They're not happy, but I want the best for my child, right? So I'm going to make sure that they don't end up in a situation like I am based off of whatever happened previously. And now with everything else that's going on, compounding that, absolutely, I think it's a little bit more than it was before. And to Mr. Peterson's point, it absolutely was a grace period, if you would, for a year and a half or 2 years, because everybody was going through the same thing. Now, a lot more people are out of it, and some people are doing better than others. So now there's that gap again, right? So now it's like, I need to be over here doing this, and I don't want to be here anymore. And since I can't, who's the next person that I can scream at or holler at? Not because I'm mad or upset at them, but just because I want better for my child, or I want better for me, and I don't know how to get there, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to make that happen. So let me just grab the closest person. What's the saying that you always, you get most upset with the person you care about the most, right? The person that's doing the most, or the person that's supporting you most, because they're right there. That's the person that you tend to holler at more than anybody else. And that's what we tend to be, because we are K-12, right? So we're K-12 education. We are the only organization, institution that produces all of us, right? All of us sitting here on this screen are K-12 graduates, right? And we have to go through this K-12 system. So let me grab them, because I have them for the next, 5 years if it's K-5, 3 years if it's middle school, or 4 years if it's high school. I have the ability to reach one of those persons during that time. So let me reach as much as I possibly can and see what I can get out of it, and hope that, that it turns out for the best. So I think that's kind of where we are.
Anyway, just for your information, I went straight to high school, okay?
Well, congratulations. Tell me the secret.
Nice.
So I do hear you, and I do understand where you're coming from, because when I was in the clinical area, as before I went into academia, a parent would come in with their child and they fuss at you. They seem as if they are so ungrateful for some of the things you do, and you keep hearing, oh, you can't take it personal, you can't take it personal. Because I work with children, I did pediatrics. You can't take it personal. But there also comes a time when you are saying, your mind is screaming and saying, who is considerate of me? How long is it that I cannot take it personal? And then it blows over, and then you may, you know what, I'm out of here. But I do understand from that point of view, because I always tell, my colleagues that you can't take it personal. If you have a sick child, you're going to behave in a crazy way until you see that the child is not sick again or getting better. So I understand that piece of it. Jump right in, Beverly. What do you have?
Well, I heard everything that you guys had to say in regards to what the issue is and this current situation that you're in. But let's talk about why you actually went into the teaching field. What excited you to make you to take that plunge into becoming a teacher and, preparing the next generation for their future?
Remember that old thing where they did a Michael Jordan commercial where it said, if I could be like Mike, right? Well, so what I saw was, if I could be like Rob, so that's why I got into education a long time ago. No,
Don't let the gray hair fool you. I'm actually
exactly.
young.
Exactly. No, I didn't. I honestly, education was not where I went. I went to school. My undergraduate was in business administration with marketing. I was around at a time where MBA was really, really big here in the state of Delaware. So I locked in there early, went through their management development program, did all of the things that they needed to do, because, you have this idea or this dream when everybody tells you, at least in my family growing up, was kind of like, you have to make some money, you have to be in business, you have to do this, you have to accelerate, blah, blah, blah. So you go through the motions with that. And I was doing pretty well for myself, but then I kind of got to a point where I left MBNA and went to another bank. That bank relocated. I had an opportunity to relocate with them, or I could take this severance package and do something that was more meaningful. And, through my college experience and some of the fraternal organizations and things that I was in, I wanted to be more service oriented. I thought that the business was really monotonous in a sense, kind of doing the same things over and over again, and not really, for me, benefiting the people or the group of people that I thought would value my expertise or value what I had to offer. So then I went back to, actually, that's not true. During that middle school, I went to a middle school for the summer and just worked a summer program just to see if I would like education. And a principal was there, and that's my mentor to this day. I kind of said, you'd be good at this. You do really well at this. So at that time, they were paying for you to go back to school, so I didn't have to use my severance package. I got to keep my money. So they paid for me. They paid for me to go back to school. Really kind of enjoyed it. I was making connections. I had relationships with students and was really, really felt good about what it was that I was doing. And then after that, just went back, got my master's in education, started my doctoral studies not too long ago. So now I'm that ABD guy. At some point, I'll finish that up. But ever since I got in, I've never wanted to do anything different. I've always wanted to be that person that could really support our young people and really give them hope and inspire that hope and really challenge them to be great, because that's what this is about. People living out their dreams and being able to attain them by any means necessary, for lack of a better word, but just getting them to realize their full potential is what it's all about. And I haven't looked back since, and would continue to do it for as long as I'm allowed.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I think it's interesting. Because I'm the same exact way. This wasn't my first choice that I knew of anyway. And I was going to have this conversation early on just about about how the impact of COVID and people leaving the profession. I think it's interesting just thinking from an education perspective. I think people feel obligated when they spend money in school. I'm just going to use, I'm not saying everybody, but just as an example, I think sometimes a teacher, when you spend money for a lot of years to become a certified teacher, sometimes you feel obligated to stay in the profession because you spent money or your parents' money to make it happen. Hence, of course, you jump in the field. There are some great teachers that have gone that direction, and there's also some probably not so successful teachers that have gone that direction and remained in the field. Unfortunately, the kids are the ones that suffer the most. I'm a guy that I spent several years in the insurance industry, did very well. And towards the end of my career in insurance, I became an entrepreneur. My wife and I had done some marvelous things in the entrepreneurial side. Ended up losing my job in insurance that I thoroughly enjoyed. And losing that job, my wife and I was 100% entrepreneurs for 3 years straight. And we worked with, childcare, we own daycares and that kind of stuff. And through that process, I got a phone call one day from a very successful, well-known principal that had an opportunity at one of our high schools. And a guy that he called could not take the job. So I got the next call. I said, listen, he said, Rob, this is up your alley working with our young Black males. You should go try it out. So to be completely honest, I took the position, yes, to be helpful, but I also wanted to figure out a way that my wife and I could work our education business with our young people into the high school system. But when I arrived at that school, I was introduced to my purpose. That makes sense. I was prepared. My preparation met up with my purpose. And in doing that, I fell in love with what I was doing and the impact that I thought I was having with our young people. And with that being the case, I found that I needed to do more in order to create more of a seat at the table. So I went back to school. Finished my bachelor's and earned a master's degree in mental health counseling. And I was trying to find a way to introduce mental health counseling to the population of students I was working with. And the rest is just history. Went through different programs and became certified as an actual teacher because, again, I just felt like it was my responsibility to continue to move in my purpose, and not only move in my purpose, but invest in my purpose, because ultimately investing in my purpose will be beneficial to those that are around me. That's, of course, where I am right now in this business.
Wonderful.
And
I think what brought you into it is what is keeping you there now.
right, exactly. And I was going to say, the funny thing is, Vilma started out as a teacher and she ended up in the nursing field.
No, the other way around.
You started out, I thought you wanted to be a teacher. That was your first choice.
I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't become a teacher. I went into nursing and in there for many, many years and loved it. But most of the things I did included education. So why not take it out further? So, and then I, came into teaching. That's a short version.
Fabulous career.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up here. What would you say, unless Vilma has another question before we wrap up?
Not a question, but just a statement, and to say that I am really, really excited that we have these two Black men who are in education, who are there, because, and I know the burden falls on just a few of us to say, we need you as an example. We need boys to see Black men in the classroom. We need them. We need you as role model. And sometimes it feels as if we are carrying a heavy burden by being that example for everyone. But I am so grateful that you have remained, because we really do, and I'm going to say the same thing I'm talking about, we really do need to see you in the classroom. We really need our young boys, especially, to model their behavior from looking at you, and the same goes for Black female teachers. So as much as possible and as long as you can hang on, make sure you reproduce yourself before you decide to leave, okay? But just hang in there, because you are making a change in somebody's life. Somebody's looking at you. I want to be like Mr. Ingram. I want to be like Mr. Peterson one day. I want to be the next athletic director. And sometimes you may not even know they're looking at you. But I'm so appreciative, and thank you.
And I like what Mr. Peterson said about he discovered his purpose and he kept on improving himself to where his background met his purpose. And I thought that was so powerful what he said. And I like, and I also love the fact that they love what they do.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
really do. And I know Butch, well, Mr. Ingram very personally, and well, I just met you, Rob, but they love what they do and they give it their 100%. I can probably say Mr. Peterson does the same thing. You know, his heart, I felt his heart when he talked about why he came into this field.
There we
Was he
go.
testifying?
Yeah.
Thank you so
No, I
much.
just wanted to, I wanted to discount
There we
the
go.
last comment about him giving 100%. He gets fired every week. I fire him probably
This is true.
And then you rehire him.
just from lack of something. I don't know what it is, but sometimes he just has to go. And
This
then
is
the next
true.
morning,
Find something, right?
right? And then the next morning we ask him to come back, but every night he gets fired somehow, some kind of way. I just want to throw that out there.
That's
Okay,
actually very
because-
true. Very true.
Because he's making others look bad. That- because he goes over and beyond and they're like, oh, wait a minute, you're a slacker here, man. Come pull yourself up.
Not good, right?
Look at Rob. Look what he does. Hey.
Definitely.
I can say this. I appreciate the kind words, but I can say this. As an entrepreneur, I've always learned. My mentor years ago shared with me that he would say by association, there you go, which meant that the folks that you associate with, you'll come up to the level that they are, right? And that's extremely important. In this business, as Mr. Ingram shared, we talked about, we all mentioned it. If I were to associate with some others in this profession that are not as positive about the profession, I would probably find myself with the same exact thought process, and not even the thought process, but the actions, right, will speak louder than my words.
Mhm.
But because I do, I think Mr. Ingram and I, I'm not going to share the story with when we actually first met in this business and what he said to me. But I will share that because of the association is why we, as we talk about exercise wise, is why we grind so hard, because it's really not about us, right? I'm a father of 5 children. I'm a husband. And I would hope that someone on the other side of what I do, when my kids walk into the classroom, are thinking about my kids as I think about other people's children. So just association is important for me. I think Mr. Ingram and I, we see eye to eye on a lot of stuff in this business. And that's why I grind the way I do in this business.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
So before we go, let's say probably a minute or so, what would you say to encourage the next generation or more people to come into the field? What's the motivational elevator speech you will give to someone who you say, hey, come into this field? Why should they come into this field?
I would say, look beyond yourself, right? Look beyond yourself. And I feel like when you're not doing what you're supposed to do or what you were created to do, you're hindering someone else from their deliverance, meaning their breakthrough, their success, whatever that might be. And because what they need can only come from you, right? They may be, and I tell people all the time, opportunities always come back again. But the question is, will you recognize it the second time it comes around, because it may be dressed a little bit differently? Meaning, if you're a kid, if you're a student that needs something, may not be 1 + 1, may not be any square roots, but it may be that something that they may need to hear. It has to come from you, because another voice they're not going to recognize. They're not so they'll continue to walk in circles and continue to struggle until you get into your rightful place to do what you were created to do. Hence, of course, what I mentioned before, I've been purposed and destined for this. I just had to meet up with my purpose, right? I was already preparing. I just didn't know it yet. But I had to answer the call in this particular business. And I would tell other folks out there, you're walking in circles trying to figure out what to do. It's because you have not identified your purpose yet. Your purpose is looking for you. Be ready, be prepared, and walk into it.
Wow, that's some powerful stuff.
You're losing your job tomorrow.
That's it.
You show him
Not
up.
good.
I'm making a text tonight. I'm making a
So
text tonight saying don't come in
so
tomorrow.
I don't even know if I can follow that up other than say, what can I say to somebody coming in education? Don't do it. No, seriously. What I would say is that people do not realize, well, I won't say that. Those in education who are truly in it for the right reasons and their heart is in it for the right reasons, realize the power that you actually have. You have the power to change generations of individuals. You have the power to make a difference. It may not always be right in front of you. You may not always get the accolade or the pat on the back, but you, by being who you are in the position that you are, have the ability to have a meaningful impact on this nation and this country and this world for years to come. And that's just simply by being there and being that person who stands in front of that child and gives them the hope that they desire and helps them, as Mr. Peters talked about, to find their dreams or find their purpose or guide them. You may not be able to give it to them or tell them what it is, but by giving them options and giving them guidance and direction, they will ultimately be able to be in position to at least be able to find that. And as I shared earlier, K-12 is the only thing that everybody has to go through. So at some point, everything that you are and everything that you become has traveled through this path. And we need people in those positions who are able to guide and direct those to make life better for those that come behind them. And the only way that that happens is in education and through education. Is it challenging? Yes. Is it dangerous at times? Probably so. Is there a struggle? Is there a battle? Is it mentally unstable? I mean, there's so many things I could use. There's so many adjectives I could use that would describe our day-to-day, but is it worth it? Absolutely 100% is it worth it. If you can change just one person's life, if you can change just one person's life who carries that on to change their family's life, you've done what you're supposed to do. And once you position yourself and once you wake up and decide that this is what I want to do, I mean, the sky's the limit, not only for you, but for your family and for everybody that you come in front of. So I would say, go get your job, get an education degree. There are colleges out there right now that are wiping out tuition for those going into education. So it's tuition free at this point in many, many places. You can go through and just, have that impact. Not to say you can't have it anywhere else, but you can't have a more powerful, meaningful impact than guiding a young person's life and making a difference in their life and their family's life and generations to come. So that's my 2 cents.
That sounds more like $1.
I like dollars.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on. We really appreciate having you back on again, Ms. Ingram. And Mr. Peterson, we welcome you anytime with Live Chat with Bill and Bill. We thank you and appreciate all that you guys have to give and offer to the generation to come and the impact that you're making. We so appreciate you both and everyone else in the educational field. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this is Live Chat with Viv and Bill. Goodbye.
Goodbye.